Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlicker shells, death slicers, peasants, vassals, minions, meat sacks. I'm a useful idiot. Welcome. And I want to talk about the Gulf of Mexico and the BP oil spill. As long as we're talking about human arrogance and tragedies that will unfold for centuries. And this story has two parts because, of course, BP's been in the news again recently because they came up with a grand settlement. And boy, what a grand settlement it is. Everyone bend over and take it. But before I get to that, let me talk about just the general disaster. Of course, by all reports, we have an expanded dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico now. And there was already a dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico previously to a certain degree because there's all this spill off from the Mississippi River and a lot of pesticides and chemicals and all sorts of other things get dispensed in the Gulf of Mexico. But of course, the devastation of the wildlife that we have in this whole zone of the Gulf of Mexico is increased exponentially as a result of this spill. And here we go, all these years later. And so now there's a government report that came out as well that says the oil leak would continue spilling for the next century or more. So here we get those numbers again, hundreds of years, this legacy that we're going to pass on to generations, and hope that they can deal with it and hope that they can fix it, and leave this legacy of arrogance and destruction ongoing for hundreds of years. The Taylor Energy Company that owns the rig has been trying to play down the extent of the problem and is still negotiating to resolve financial obligations. They said that, quote, nothing more can be done, unquote. So they just want to get out from underneath it. The whole company is, for all practical purposes, ceased to exist. I think they only have 2 or 3 employees now and are basically only existing now to finalize their obligations for this disaster. But the Interior Department wants more to be done, and 1 out of 25 wells buried by the sand continue to leak. So we have these wells that get closed and then get covered by sand, and then we have wells like the BP disaster one where the sealant is still not effective, and so we still have just massive amounts of oil that are still leaking. And this is very similar to kind of what we see in Alaska. The Exxon Valdez has been decades now, and we still have oil on the shores and beaches up there, and the oil spill still affects the wildlife in that region, and it's still a lot of it on the ocean floor as well. And of course, an investigation said that the leaks in the Gulf are worse than anything that's been acknowledged by these energy companies or the government publicly. So there's no surprise there. There's still still is tar washing up on the shores there, and still also the after effects of massive use of Corexit used to disperse oil, break down dispersed oil, over 1 million gallons of Corexit along with the oil. And the oil is broken down in smaller components, but it's still out there, and the effects will be felt for hundreds of years, as pointed out by this report. And then, of course, now that the public furor has died down in 2017, Gulf oil will again be at record production, and a bunch of new leases will be passed out. So before the old problem is even corrected, we're going to get some more rigs in there and expand Gulf oil production once again. According to this report, there's leaks daily there's between 42 and 2,329 gallons a day, an average of 84 gallons a day. And the energy companies and the government have essentially been saying it's about 4 gallons a day. So only really, about 20 times what's been acknowledged. Another report said that 300,000 to 1.4 million gallons of leaks since 2004, and so it's the gift that keeps on giving, the leak that won't be stopped. And once again, it bears some resemblance to these nuclear disaster events where the effects, the technology doesn't really exist to fully recover from these events. the greed and fraud, and confluence of greed and fraud and science continues to go on in these boondoggles, and then the after effects are passed on, for generations out of the arrogance of human beings. And then so the last part of the story, which is the part that's in the news right now, is this BP. They finally were fined $20 billion, and to add insult to injury on an epic scale, 15.3 billion of that will be tax write-offs, so it'll be subsidized. And the way they do that is they bypass the final charge being against the Clean Water Act. So $5.5 billion is labeled as non-tax deductible as a violation of the Clean Water Act, and the rest being punitive and also having to do with natural resource damage payments, restoration, and reimbursement of government costs. That will all be a tax write-off. So the public gets to pay $15 billion of the BP fine for the disaster that humanity's inherited. BP gets off just doing the cost of business, a environmental destruction tax, as it were, and so it goes. So certainly no motivation or impetus for BP to clean up their act, so to speak. Cleaning up their act would be even more difficult than cleaning up the environment. I'm Useful Idiot. Don't you be too.